The Wealth Equation podcast by Maurice L. Wilson reveals how to accelerate your wealth and secure more money, time, and freedom by leveraging the investment powers of real estate, entrepreneurship, the stock market, and more. Tune in as host Maurice L. Wilson, an engineer turned financial advisor, offers you a step-by-step formula to solve your wealth equation once and for all. Here's Maurice.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Wealth Equation podcast with Maurice L. Wilson of Wilson Wealth. Today's going to be a really great episode. Hope you're joining me live. If not, be sure to check us out on YouTube and all of the available podcast platforms. For those of you who are fortunate enough to be with us today live, you're in for a treat. Today, I have a very special guest out of Maryland, Eric D. Brotman of BFG Financial Advisors. He is a accomplished. I would say, hey, Eric is life goals for me. For people who understand that phrase, Eric's one of those gentlemen you meet and you realize you haven't been doing enough. And so I'm really going to learn something here today as well, and I hope you do the same. Eric, coming your own way. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Oh my goodness! Well, first of all, you did such a good job introducing me. I want to just bring you with me everywhere I speak. That would be great. Like you said, I'm the CEO of BFG Financial Advisors here in Lutherville, Maryland. Been in practice for 32 years, so I think I got a number of years on you. So don't feel so bad. It's a marathon, not a sprint. We've been doing wealth management for families all over the country now for again 3 decades. Yeah. And I was a startup in 2003. Okay. And now I'm working my succession plan and writing books and speaking and just having a lot of fun. You know, one thing your audience is going to find out real fast. If it's not fun, I'm not doing it. So this should be a good time tonight.
And the audience is going to be multiple ones here. I mean, we're going to hit with what you primarily, I'm going to say primarily do, but for anybody that's a financial advisor in the audience who's wondering why are 2 financial advisors talking, Eric, I mean, let's just go ahead and do the spoilers now. Tell them all the businesses that you do so we can really set the stage for what you do.
Yeah, no, I've been running what used to be Brotman Financial Group and was rebranded a number of years ago as BFG Financial Advisors now for 22 years. I also am a consultant. I started Brotman Consulting Group a number of years ago and work with financial advisors all over the country. And I do a lot of speaking and coaching and facilitations, working with teams. And then I also have a media group, and that helped us create a podcast and create a brand. And I've written 3 books and a lot of articles. And I'm easy to find online, which is good, I think. And so my role is changing here, Maurice. I am January 1st of next year stepping down as CEO after a really long, wonderful stretch. My successor is being named. Okay. Your audience is going to get a sneak peek because it hasn't hit the papers yet, but it's coming. And my job is going to be to do mentoring and coaching and teaching and speaking and growing the organization. So we've done a number of M&A deals. We've helped other advisors with their succession plans. You and I we talked before we came on air. We're not competitors. We're colleagues. And at the end of the day, I think there's so much abundance and so many opportunities that, households, families need financial advice, and they're going to work with somebody they identify with and feel good about.
And, picking up on that, I mean, what people, when they think financial advice and they think about what you and I do, if it's not college, which is a very, near-term goal, right? We know it's retirement. And that's from what I've read about you when we talked, I'm going to say specialize in, but you wrote a really good book about retirement called Don't Retire. Don't Retire, Graduate. It's sitting right here on the screen. I was going to say educate. And so
you can do that too.
And I would say that of all the titles I've seen over my 20 years in the business, this is one, oh, graduate. That's because it's like you're at the retirement stage and you jump back to the high school, college,
Yes.
phraseology. So delve into that. Like, what does
Yeah.
that mean for the audience who haven't been fortunate enough to read your book yet?
Well, not yet, hopefully, but so here's the punchline.
Okay.
Retirement in its traditional sense is dreadful and no one should do it. And there's your lift quote for the show. Retirement in its present form, the way it's drafted, is a punishment. It's not something you succeed into. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And let me explain what I mean. In the 1800s, retirement was created in Germany, and it was created by Otto von Bismarck. I'm not making this up.
It's all
And
about
Otto von Bismarck. And what he did was he said that people will essentially be forced to leave the workforce so that there's jobs for younger people. And it was like a sentence. You were sentenced to retire,
okay.
which doesn't sound appealing at all. There is a building at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, named the Osler Building. And there was a study done in, I think, 1913 or something like that. And there was a paper written by Dr. Osler, who said that your years of value are in your 20s. Once you're 40, you're really not worth very much, and by 60, you've had it. And I don't know about you, and I'm older than you, but not by a lot. I'm not 60 yet, but I don't
Right.
think I'm going to have had it.
No.
So, and then remember, we speak English, but we really don't. We speak American, which is butchered English from the UK. And in English, the word retire means to sleep.
Oh
It's
wow.
to retreat, or to go to sleep for the night is to retire for the night. It's literally like a dirt nap. Um, so you use LinkedIn. I know you use LinkedIn. There's people watching us on LinkedIn tonight. If you are looking for somebody to network with and you see somebody's profile on LinkedIn and it just says retired, you're going to keep scrolling. It might as well say dead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I redefine retirement not as the absence of work, but as the absence of needing to work. If you have financial independence, you have a level of freedom, whether you're 42 or 82 when you get there. You have a level of freedom that allows you to thrive and to find joy in what you do. And if it happens to make you money, super, because you don't need it, but you're doing something you're passionate about. Well, that sounds a whole lot better than daytime TV and shuffleboard.
I agree. I
I'll
agree.
pass.
I agree. I
So,
agree.
and think about graduation. When you graduate, high school, college, any program, when you graduate, it's the end. It's commencement, right? It's the end, but it's also the beginning.
That's true.
People look forward to it because it springs you forward. It's not a retreat.
Right.
So I wrote the book to help people sort of redefine what retirement means and to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And I ask every guest on my podcast, what do you want to be when you grow up? And some of them are dumbfounded by the question because they haven't been asked since they were 7 and they wanted to be astronauts.
That's true.
But there's a better path.
Right.
For as long as we're blessed to be here and be coherent and physically able and doing something we love, I don't want to stop doing what I'm doing. If I'm 80 and still useful, I want to be at it, not because I need it, but because it drives me. But I'm sure as heck not going to try and die at my desk either.
No, and I'm seeing I'm on YouTube a lot, and I'm seeing now where they're saying, hey, if you're 55 and working, stop. If you're 60 and working, stop. They're lying to you about something. These are the titles. I haven't clicked on it because it's clickbait.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
personally want to work till 70. But Eric, I think like you're stepping down, but you're not walking out the door, right? What we get to do for a living is a blessing, and
Yes.
it's just so dynamic. One of the main reasons I left engineering, I'm sitting in my apartment in Detroit in 2000, dot-com bubbles blowing up, and there's these trackers on the bottom of the screen. Jim Cramer's is yelling, and I'm like, man, whatever this is about, it's way more interesting than what I'm doing in my cubicle down at Chrysler, And I
Okay.
connect the dots. I'm like, the bottom of the screen affects Main Street. I instantly saw that, and so we love what we do. But a lot of I'll say my clients, I won't speak for you.
Yeah.
and you're in the DC, Virginia, Maryland area, so everybody knows a lot of government workers and whatnot. Sometimes they take the great job, but they aren't following their passion. So are you finding that this graduate, are you finding it's freeing people to pursue that? Have you found that as an inflection point for your clients when they've read the book or talked about it?
Well, certainly some of them have, and we've actually had some prospective clients read the book and then come in and they have questions before we even get started about that, which I think is kind of neat. Yeah. Your question's a complicated one. Okay. because everybody's different. You know that if you work with 100 people, you're going to get 100 answers to this question. But I think there are two common themes. There's those folks who really don't like what they're doing and they want to reach that level of freedom so that they can do something else.
Correct.
And that's a lot of people. If you're starting to get sick to your stomach on Sunday night about 7 or 8 o'clock because tomorrow's Monday, then you're doing the wrong thing for a living.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if that describes you, then you want to be done as soon as possible, and that means you have to pivot. And to pivot might mean getting re-educated or learning a new skill. It might mean hitting financial independence and doing something that right now is a side hustle. Right. I like to beat on millennials because everybody likes to beat on millennials, but they did come up with the side hustle. Us Gen Xers didn't come up with this.
No,
and the side hustle is great because number one, it puts a few extra dollars in your pocket and allows you to save and potentially reach financial independence sooner. It also gives you a fallback. If you wind up unemployed, either on purpose because you've said take this job and shove it, or because there's been a layoff or something's happened, and so they did discover something I think really, really important, or invent something important. I'm giving them credit for one thing and one thing only. That's it. So that's the first group. The first group is people who don't like what they're doing and really want to be done and find another path. And the sooner they can get to that finish line, the sooner they can start living. And I know that sounds profoundly sad, actually, but there's a finish line and they're gunning for it. They are putting away money and doing the right things and saying, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to reach this inflection point. Right. The second group of people are people who really enjoy what they're doing.
Right.
And whether they've reached financial independence or not, they want to amplify what they're doing. They want to impact more people. They want to change the world in different ways. They want to leave a legacy, not just a financial legacy. They want to leave the legacy of a business or a farm or a family or other things. And so I think there's two tracks to run on here that are most common. Those who are enthusiastic about what they do during the day and those who aren't. And it's pretty binary. It's pretty, flip the switch because for folks who like what they do are much happier in every conceivable way than folks who are like, oh, it's Monday, I can't stand it.
Yeah. I like your weekend analogy. I tell people like, okay, Friday, you're excited, you're done with this thing, right? Saturday, you do for you and I, honey-do list, for those who aren't,
Man, how did you know?
Exactly. And you start to breathe and enjoy life on Saturday, and I think on Sunday, you start thinking, hey, I can really embrace this and do something I want. And then Sunday, you rise determined, and then all your self-doubts kick in on Sunday night, and you trudge yourself to work on Monday. One of my jokes about the AI revolution and all this stuff, or just people wanting to get back to factory jobs and whatnot, is that we never liked any of these jobs. Factory, right. We didn't want to be in the farm, but there are things that people want to do. So, but first you got to get to that financial independence you were talking about.
Right. That's
right. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes people have made or are making when it comes to getting the right or the privilege to decide, hey, I'm retired or I'm going to graduate? What do you?
Well, first, there's so many. There's so many different ways to mess this up, and I don't want to make it sound like neuroscience. It's not. Yeah. But we are all victims of our own behavior, our own upbringing, our own circumstances sometimes. And so I think people have a lot of folks have a tendency to overspend. I think folks have a tendency to inflate what they think their earning capacity might be or become.
Yes.
You see some people who are really high income, entertainers, athletes, people who make an obscene amount of money by any definition, who forget that their career might only be 3 or 4 years.
All day. All day.
And they start to live like they're going to make that much money every year for the rest of their lives, and they're not. And it creates a real problem, right?
Mhm.
So I think part of it is not having the right habits. Part of it's overspending. Personal debt is an albatross. Student loans, by the way,
Yeah.
I consider student loans on almost any undergraduate education to be a terrible idea. All right. Now I know I just made a lot of people go, huh?
Yep.
But getting an education and trying to improve your station in life economically is a wonderful thing to do. But you don't need a name brand school to do it. You
No,
need a piece of paper.
that's true. That's
You
true.
need an entry ticket. It is not necessary to spend 50, 60, 80, 90, $100,000 a year
Mhm.
for an undergraduate education. If you want to borrow money to go to law school, dental school,
Mhm.
for graduate, I get it, because that is now a career investment.
Right.
But to borrow money to go to some fancy school to get a political science degree or a minor in art history, you're out of your mind. If you don't have money, if you have it, great, go spend it, enjoy yourself.
Right.
But if you don't have it,
Mhm.
you don't want to go into that kind of debt as a young person, because this really, time is only on your side if you're able to start immediately.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt
No, no,
you.
you're fine. So think about what it takes to build a nest egg. We all instinctively understand the math. You put away $100 a check for 50 years and it's going to become something, right? I mean, you can do the math. But if you're starting not at zero, but at negative 30, 40, 80, $100,000,
That's true.
it's going to take you some time to get there.
That's true.
And if you look at Social Security, let's talk about the third rail, because neither of us, I presume, are running for office, so we can do this
No,
without getting without having rotten vegetables thrown at our cars or something. But
not a
um, but think about it. When Social Security was started, or pensions, which, as you know, have gone largely the way of the dodo. I mean, you've got some government pensions, but there aren't that many in the private sector anymore.
right.
When that happened, people were starting their careers at 18.
That's true.
In the 50s and 60s, most people didn't go to college. They got a high school degree and they went to work. So they're 18 years old. They're getting emancipated. They're starting their careers. They were going to work until 60 or 65 years old, and they were dead at 72. Okay. Today, people don't start their careers till 22, 23, 25. If they're doctors, they're 30,
Mhm.
right? They want to retire when they're 56 and could live to be 101. The, the math doesn't math.
It doesn't matter.
All right. And so Social Security has problems because the math doesn't math. People are
Mhm.
living 30 and 40 and 50 years past their retirement age.
True.
And they're not entering the workforce as early as they used to. And when they do enter the workforce, if they're at negative 40,000, people are paying for student loans when they've got kids to educate already.
Yes, I've seen that firsthand. It's pretty crazy.
So you asked, what are the things that derail people? Debt is a killer.
Okay.
All right. Now, not all debt is bad debt. And I understand that. A mortgage is not bad debt if it's a reasonable mortgage rate, and it's a home that's potentially appreciating, and it's where you're going to live for a long time.
Right.
That's fine. If you're buying a business or starting a business and there's loans involved in starting a business, I don't know how you started yours, but I had to borrow from every place because no bank
Credit
would
card.
talk to me. Yeah, no bank would talk to me. Now they're tripping over themselves to get in our door.
It's
But
all, it's all your P&L.
correct, and some tax returns. But
Mm,
when I didn't have 2 years of history, the banks were like, "No, sorry, thanks
yeah,
for playing."
that's true.
So if you look at the way that those decisions get made, and that's debt, but that's an investment.
Right.
All right. Getting a Gucci watch is not generally an investment. Buying a car is a horrendous investment. They
Yeah.
don't appreciate, unless you're collecting
Mhm.
vintage rare cars and there's a market to resell them.
Right.
The Honda you just drove off the lot is not appreciating. In fact, it's worth a lot less than it was 10 minutes ago.
Yep.
So when we get into debt situations, it really does hamper us. And so I encourage people, and in the book, one of the things that I talk about is pay yourself first.
Yes.
It's not enough to live within your means, because living within your means means you make $80,000 a year and you spend $80,000 a year. Well, you're living within your means, but the day your paycheck stops, you're broke.
True.
So you have to live within some percentage of your means. And if you start doing this at 22, that percentage might be 85%.
Right.
If you started at 42, it might be 68% that you had to live on, because you're not going to catch up, that you have time on your side when you start early. So you start those habits and you start funding your 401k, and you start funding an HSA account, and you start funding a mutual fund account or a savings account or whatever it is.
Right.
And you just do it, and you ignore the news du jour, the crisis du jour, which I know you tell your clients that is it a good time to invest? Well, I don't know. I was watching CNBC and look what happened. That news, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It really doesn't matter. Now, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter to everyone. There are certainly people where it matters. But if you're doing the right thing, and if you're young and you're buying, it doesn't matter what the news du jour is. Don't get fooled by it.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So it's all behavior. It's funny, when we started the company, one of the pillars we were thinking of using in our branding and our marketing was that we were assisting with behavior management. This is a true story. And we had an advisory board, and we had a focus group, and we asked people what they thought about it. And the guys thought it was great, and the women hated it. Hated it. They did not want anyone to manage their behavior in any way, shape, or form. And it wasn't something I had thought of, because I have the Neanderthal brain, but we had to not use it. But the truth is, behavioral finance has become a field of study. It's psychology. And the way to build wealth, I believe, is almost entirely based on behavior.
Yeah. I would say behavior is you have fees. We won't get into whether you got fees, taxes, and behavior. Those are the three things that derail returns, and so you're totally right. And the industry has tried to address this with the target date funds, right? And used to be, when I looked at the client's 401k, you probably remember this, in the days of the big time mutual funds, they'd have 50 mutual funds in their 401k.
Yes.
And I would have to charge, because I'm like, I have to go through all of these. Then it was the index funds. Now it's a target date fund. So you feel like the target date funds are helping to kind of address the behavioral lag on people's retirement returns?
I think the target date funds are a little bit like training wheels on a bicycle.
Okay.
They're going to teach you to ride, but you're not going to look cool riding them for very long.
And I just want to interject here, because we didn't practice or do any. I was hoping you and I were on the same page on target date funds, and it sounds like we are. It sounds like we are. So you go ahead.
Well, I'm sure we'll find something we can argue about. That makes for good video.
Right,
but no, target date funds, they're fine for a small account,
right,
where you don't have to worry about allocation, and you just do it. But here's the thing: target dates aren't all made the same.
That's true.
Target date X and target date Y and target date Z have completely different strategies baked into them, and the costs tend to be a lot higher.
Yes.
Because it's like the fund of funds. You've got the costs of the costs. So while I don't think they're horrible, I do think that they are training wheels, and it's better to do that than do nothing. So if you're having analysis paralysis and you're saying, I don't know what to pick,
right,
it's much better to do that and say, okay, I'm going to get on this glide path and start the account. If you're 23 and you've got your first job and you're putting $80 a check away, be in a target fund. It's fine.
Right.
But at some point along the way, those $80 deposits are going to become 10 or 20 or 30 or $50,000. At which point, maybe you don't want to just hold a fund that's in whatever it's in, because you can look under the hood. Right. Investors and consumers can look under the hood if they want, but they don't any more than I look under the hood of my car, because I don't know what's going on under there.
That's true. Same here. That's true.
It's all transparent. It's in your 400-page prospectus. Happy reading. Have you ever read a 400-page prospectus? Be honest with me.
No, I checked. I have my highlights. Annualized returns, fees, composition.
Okay.
Management tenure.
I'm not sure I know anyone who's ever read one. And by the way, if anyone generally were to sit there and read it, they wouldn't understand it in the first
That's true.
place.
That's true. That's true.
So it's not helpful. All the
Mhm.
disclosures are not helpful.
Right.
There's a much better way to educate, and we're not going to do a compliance show tonight,
Right. Right.
because everyone will be like, "Click, I'm done with this."
Yeah.
I don't want
Yeah.
to talk about that, but consumers beware, because there's so much out there that it's confusing, and I almost think it's confusing on purpose.
Mm, okay. Okay. I hadn't thought about that, but yes.
Well,
Particularly,
it's much easier to hide the fine print on page 309
that's true.
than it is to stick it on a 4-page fact sheet where it's a critical piece.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
And you see that in contracts, you see it in legal documents, you see it in various types of things, and unfortunately, consumers, this is a trust business.
Right.
It's a trust business. People have to in the same way that you have to trust that your dentist understands what's going on with your molar, because you don't. You
Right.
have to trust the professionals, and the financial industry has a real problem. In my opinion, it's got a real problem with helping consumers understand who are professionals and who are salespeople.
And this is true. This is true.
And the day you graduate from college and you take a job at XYZ Mutual, and I'm not picking on anybody, but you take that job and your business card says financial advisor, financial representative, you've got 4 hours of experience.
Right. That's true.
Okay?
That's true.
That is like a license to hurt somebody.
This is true. This is
All
true.
right. Accountants have to go through a process. They have to get their undergraduate degree. They have to do a certain number of hours. They have to pass a board exam. They have to. Lawyers have to spend certain number of hours and go to law school and pass the bar, and there are credentials. You're a financial advisor if you say you are the day you show up at some of these companies. Well,
I mean, it's true.
I
I mean,
mean,
I think insurance professionals have to do a little bit more classes. At least
uh,
I did for my
well, but
life.
not the day you show up.
Not the day you
I
should.
mean,
No, you're
yes,
right.
yes,
You're
you have to be licensed to sell, but I got news for you.
right.
If you had a friend who wanted to buy something, they'd send somebody with you to sell them something.
That's true.
Somebody with a license was going with you.
That's true. That's true.
It's just it's a system that it rewards bad behavior
This
by
is
the
true.
advisor.
This is
It
true.
does not put the client first. And the big lobbies are fighting this stuff in Washington. They're fighting against fiduciary standards. They're fighting against putting clients' interest before their own, because it's not good for the companies that manufacture product.
This is true. this
So,
is this is
so
true.
I presume, and I'm in deep trouble if I'm wrong, but I presume that Wilson Wealth is not a product manufacturer, and that you don't have your own fund, your own annuity, your own insurance contract, your own anything.
Nope.
You are representing clients and clients' interest only, and that's that.
All day, 100%. That's
Okay.
why I left the broker dealer. But go ahead. Yeah.
So here's what that means.
Mhm.
That means that if you have 100 clients, you have 100 bosses, but you're only responsible to them.
That's true.
You are not responsible to make sure that whatever company has whatever on the shelf, that
Mhm.
you're having enough people buy it
Right.
so that you can keep your cubicle and go on your reward trip.
Yeah. There's no quotas.
So, and consumers don't know the difference, and some do. I know there's some savvy families out there and consumers out there, but a lot of them don't. And so, being able to be transparent with your fees, because they matter.
Right.
And that's not to say that the lowest cost provider is always the best. I don't want the cheapest dentist either. While we're talking about that, at some point, I'm willing to pay a little more for certain experience, for certain service, for certain value, for certain expertise. I don't want the cheapest lawyer. I don't want the cheapest auto mechanic.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right. There's certain things that are commodities where cheap is fine. You know where it's fine in our business? Index funds. If you're going to buy an index fund, cheap is good, because they all own the same thing. If there are 6 funds and they all own the S&P 500 index, they should be basically the same.
That's true.
At which point cost matters, because they're all the same.
That's true.
But if there's any intellectual capacity, if there's any advice, if there's any crafting or uniqueness to the plan at all, it's no longer all the same. It can't be cookie cutter anymore.
Right. Right. No, that's true. And I mean, I think this is where this is all still kind of related to the product we started with, which is Target Date Fund, where, you know, I think that's another product that the industry has created. To your point, it's very opaque. And I think one of
Yes.
the biggest disservices it does is it kind of, I think, was created because the index funds got too popular, I think. And they were working so well. So they created this target date funds, and they're everywhere now. They're in the 529 plans. But I think one of the biggest problems with that particular product, if I can, is that it's what you said earlier, the longevity is so long now, and I started so late, and I'm shutting down at 55, and I probably should be pressing the metal a little bit more. And if they don't have an advisor telling them that, then they're just saying, hey, I want to retire in 2035, and I'm 55 now, and this is my solution. So yeah, I think the industry definitely can do a disservice to people when they kind of create these all-in-one products. Um,
Well, age isn't the only variable that matters. In
that's true.
fact, it may not matter very much at all.
That's true.
Health matters,
Yep.
family status matters, your wealth level matters. All these things matter. If you show me two people who are 45 years old,
Mhm,
who make the same amount of money every year,
mhm,
who have the same account balance,
mhm.
and they both want to retire in 10 years,
Right.
and one of them has four children and an 80-year-old mom in a assisted living,
Mhm,
and one of them is single with no kids. You can't tell me
mhm.
they should invest the same way. They're both the same age. They both want to retire the same time. There is nothing else in common between those two human beings.
This is true. This is true.
And that's what's wrong with target dates. And that's what's wrong with just checking a box and moving on.
This is true. This is true. I mean, it's almost like I know we're biased on this thing where we're almost expressing the need for intervention with a financial advisor or something. I mean, but it's not what I've learned. When I got in the business, and everything was, Susie Orman get out of debt or Dave Ramsey get out of debt, right? We didn't talk about these type of topics. What I didn't see coming, at least for me, is the amount of wealth that's been accumulated in these accounts, and now it's just a different story. Combined with the money that's one generation ahead. Like, hey, Maurice, I've just inherited $1 million, and I got everything you just said, Eric, about the multi-generational house. And what do I do, right? And so
Mhm.
you can't just robo advise and index fund that. That has to be gained out. Trust accounts are no longer just for rich people. And
That's
it's
right.
almost like, yeah, I mean, you almost, and people say, Maurice, what are you talking about? Well, I don't know about you, but people still don't understand Roth IRAs. Like, so people don't understand
Basically,
Roth. You know what I'm saying? So if you don't understand Roth IRA, then it gets more complex from there. So it
it
really does.
does.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why it's like with your books and whatnot, you're making the industry more accessible, right? You're creating a glide path to kind of get this advice. Hey, come in, and at your firm, and not that I'm trying to really, well, we are plugging you. Your advisors are kind of compensated, in a manner. I think I like what's to me that
Mhm.
allows the client to kind of feel okay. I mean, tell them about how you work with your advisors.
Yeah, no, all of our advisors are salaried.
Yeah.
And when I say that at a financial advisory conference, they're all perplexed. Like, what do
Yes.
you mean they're salaried?
Yeah.
And I mean it. There's a salary because we're paid for the work that we do,
Right.
and selling anything to anyone is not part of how any of our folks get paid. Our folks get paid on client acquisition, client retention, and client service,
Right.
and and maintaining their integrity and their licensure and their compliance record and doing the right things. If you take great care of people, others will flock to you.
It is a pleasure to have you join us for this episode of The Wealth Equation. Be sure to visit wilsonwealth.com for more information about building wealth. We look forward to helping you next time on The Wealth Equation.